The first thing is to say this is a citizen dialogue. So that means you're all here as individuals. You're not here representing any other interest. So, even if you do belong to an organization, for example, that might have an interest in water, you're not here today to represent that organizational interest. We really want you here today as a citizen and speaking for yourself and your ideas.
The premise of Alberta Climate Dialogues is that we can't adequately address climate change unless we have the input of a diverse range of citizens. So we don't want you here because you look alike or think alike. We want you here because you're going to hopefully disagree with one another.
The goals for the Oldman Watershed Council out of this deliberative climate panel are just hearing from the community. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about climate change yet, and we're really keen and interested to hear what people have to say. So I think there's probably a wide range of opinions on the topic and what should be done about it, if anything. And we really just want to hear those voices, and we're asking them for their advice to us. And we really want to act on their advice and actually do something with it. And that's going to relate to our water quantity goals and our water quality goals in terms of what we can do as a local community group and what we can ask the government of Alberta to do. Our mandate is to be the grassroots local voice for the area. And so all the councils are based on the major river, and in this case is the Oldman River, from the mountain headwaters down through the prairies to where the Oldman meets the Bow River.
Done a number of citizens panels, and what's interesting about this one is the scope of what we're going to try to do in one day. So most citizen panels would go through a number of sessions, and we're going to try to come up with a deep level of conversation, but do it within a day frame.
If I look at how people who are participants in the deliberation are clarifying their views or shifting their views, I think it's also about learning from the people around you, not just in the sense of information traveling, but in the sense of really being able to be impressed and open to the richness of the perspective of someone different than you. So I think all of that's feeding into the learning of the time.
Climate change and water are intertwined. I mean, the climate determines really how much water we have in the long term. Weather determines how much water we have on a day-to-day. So, you have to talk about weather, climate, and water probably. The floods that we had in Alberta last spring, those weren't caused by climate change, but we can pretty much say they were made worse by climate change. The droughts that we go through, those aren't caused by climate change, but we can pretty much say now they're being made worse by climate change. We're seeing too many extreme events for it to be part of the old ways, part of the old climate normals. So we're seeing now a changing climate, which is seeing much more extreme weather, and extreme weather is what our society finds most difficult to deal with.
Climate change is a statistically significant variation in the average climate or its variability. But the key words here are that it has to last decades or longer. Just about everybody in Alberta gets their water from the Rocky Mountains. But did you know 60% of the people in Saskatchewan also get their water from the Rocky Mountains? And even people in southwestern Manitoba get their water from the Rocky Mountains.
Deliberative democracy is a way in which you engage people, and the group comes together to discuss a topic, and they have a free and open way of sharing. So it's different in terms of debating where you're trying to win or lose. You're actually sharing information and you're discussing it together collectively to kind of build on that information and get better ideas out of what you're discussing.
One of the things that's really important for the event is that we have trained facilitators and trained note takers.
Originally, I was kind of nervous to share my opinions. I feel like, in a way, a little fish in a big sea in terms of making change and things like that, but having a group panel where everyone is supportive of your ideas kind of gives you the sense that you're not alone and there are people trying to make change.
My water comes from a well, and so I'm very concerned about what we're moving into. If we're not really accessing surface water so much anymore, then I'm kind of concerned with groundwater. I mean, we see in some places where, especially And a good example, I guess, would be Mexico, where they're having large sinkholes appear because they've taken so much of the groundwater. And so these are concerns that I actually have today, like what are the effects going to be? What are the impacts? If we start accessing large amounts of groundwater and we start using that in place of surface water.
Look at that top map. It's blue in Antarctica, but there's no people. It's blue in Greenland, there's very few people. The only populated part of the world that's blue is Western Canada. We have the noisiest climate on Earth, and therefore it'll be a long time before climate change is very clear to the public, even though scientists know that it's occurring. And that's a bit problematic if you give a lot of talks like Jim and I on climate change. It's hard to expect the audience to believe you when we live in the part of the world where it's hardest to separate the signal from the noise.
What are your concerns about water?
Boy, water's life. If we don't look after it, there's no life. And it's important to not just us, but to birds, to animals, to plants, to everything.
We need to do our part to, make better use of our water, and not have, government or corporations dictate the usage of water. Also with climate change, it's really noticeable how, the rivers are slowly, they're getting smaller. Streams are being more straight than the usual course they make. So, but I would have to say, water is life. It's very important.
I was listening to a documentary the other day where they said, all the water we have on the earth, we've had for billions of years, and it recycles and keeps recycling. So all the water that's in you, all the water that's in me, all the water that's in each of us has actually probably passed through each of us how many times?
So that's the big picture thing, is one way or the other, being able to accept that we have limitations in our watershed and that we need to learn how to live with that.
If there aren't enough incentives or carrots in front of people to conserve water, then they just won't do it. They won't care enough to do it. And we're seeing that right now.
The citizen panel, I believe, is a very interesting combination of diversified backgrounds and people all interested in water. And I think it's a really good starting place to get information from stakeholders.
Deliberative democracy takes dialogue to the next step by asking people with diverse viewpoints, values, and interests to find common ground, and then based on that common ground to make some choices by considering trade-offs, compromises, pros and cons. And this is really key in managing public natural resources.